Welcome, and take a deep breath. Get comfortable as we journey together through a world of elements, balance, and destiny. Let the story wash over you, fact by fact, as we explore the lives that shaped Avatar, The Last Airbender. Our story begins not with a hero, but with a boy frozen in time. Imagine being 12 years old, full of energy and mischief, running away from the weight of responsibility placed on your shoulders, only to wake up a century later to find everything you knew and loved has vanished. This is the reality of Aang, the last Airbender, a monk who never wanted to be the Avatar. With his distinctive blue arrow tattoos marking his head and limbs, symbols of his mastery of airbending at the remarkably young age of 12, Aang was the youngest airbending master in history. But these tattoos represented more than skill, they marked him as someone special among the air nomads, someone whose carefree spirit and natural talent made him beloved by all who knew him. Aang's world was one of 4 nations living in delicate harmony, the water tribes dwelling at the poles, the earth kingdom spanning a vast continent, the Fire Nation on volcanic islands, and the air nomads residing in temples perched on remote mountain peaks. Within this world, certain people were born with the ability to manipulate, or bend, one of the 4 elements. Waterbenders could shape water and ice with fluid, flowing movements. Earthbenders commanded stone and earth with strong, grounded stances. Firebenders created and controlled flames through aggressive, passionate forms. And airbenders, the rarest of all by the time our story begins, moved air itself with circular, evasive techniques that reflected their peaceful, spiritual nature. Yet among all these benders, one person was destined to master all 4 elements, the Avatar, the bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds, reborn generation after generation to maintain balance. But Aang never wanted this destiny. When the monks of the Southern Air Temple discovered he was the Avatar, learning this at the tender age of 12 instead of the traditional 16, they began to separate him from his friends, from his childhood, from everything that brought him joy. His guardian and father figure, Monk Gyatso, with his kind eyes and gentle wisdom, was the only one who understood that Aang was still just a child who needed to laugh, to play, to experience the simple joys of airbending scooters and sky bison rides. Gyatso had raised Aang, taught him, and loved him like a son, trying desperately to let the boy hold on to his childhood just a little longer. But the other monks grew impatient, speaking of war, of duty, of sending Aang away for more serious training. Overwhelmed and afraid, Aang made a choice that would haunt him. He ran away on his flying bison, Appa, into a storm-filled night. That storm should have killed him. The waves crashed, the lightning split the sky, and as Aang plunged into the freezing ocean, his survival instinct triggered something profound, the Avatar state. In this defensive reaction, Aang unconsciously accessed the combined power and knowledge of all his past lives, creating a sphere of air around himself and Appa that froze them in an iceberg, perfectly preserved. For 100 years, the world turned without its Avatar. And in those 100 years, everything changed. The Fire Nation, led by the ambitious and ruthless Fire Lord Sozin, had used the power of a comet that enhanced firebending to launch a devastating attack. They struck the air nomads first, methodically eliminating every air temple, every monk, every man, woman, and child who called the sky their home. Monk Gyatso fought valiantly, his skeleton later found surrounded by countless Fire Nation soldiers, but even his mastery couldn't save the air nomads from extinction. As they journeyed, Sokka's role evolved beyond the warrior he desperately wanted to be. While he couldn't bend elements, Sokka possessed something equally valuable: his mind. He became the group's strategist, planner, and often their voice of reason when Aang and Katara's emotions threatened to lead them astray. At the Northern Water Tribe, Sokka's tactical thinking helped defend against a massive Fire Nation invasion, his strategies coordinating benders and warriors in ways that proved crucial. But Sokka's journey was also about accepting himself, learning that being a warrior didn't mean having powers, and that his intelligence, creativity, and loyalty made him indispensable. His weapons of choice, his boomerang, which always returned to him, and his club, became extensions of himself, proof that non-benders could stand alongside the most powerful benders in the world. Sokka also carried the pain of feeling he'd failed his father by not being allowed to go to war with the other men, a wound that wouldn't fully heal until he could prove his worth in his own eyes. Throughout their travels, they were joined by Appa, who was far more than just transportation. Sky Bison were the original airbenders, the animals from whom humans first learned to bend air thousands of years ago. Appa, with his massive size, gentle nature, and unwavering loyalty, was Aang's oldest friend and last connection to his previous life. They had bonded when Aang was a young monk and Appa was just a calf, creating a relationship so deep it transcended words. Appa could sense Aang's emotions, responding to his distress and joy alike. The bison's 6 legs allowed him to run across land or climb sheer cliffs, while his flat tail steered him through the air. When Aang guided him using airbending and gentle touches to his horns, they moved through the sky like they were one being. For Aang, losing Appa would mean losing not just his ability to travel efficiently, but his last living tie to the air nomads, his last reminder that he wasn't completely alone in the world. Prince Zuko's hunt for the Avatar revealed the complexity of his character. Unlike other Fire Nation antagonists who believed in their nation's supremacy, Zuko was driven purely by personal desperation. His crew aboard his ship, particularly the earth-bending soldier they'd captured who Zuko treated with unexpected mercy, or the crew members who witnessed his determination firsthand, saw a prince who was both ruthless in pursuit of his goal and surprisingly honorable in his methods. Zuko refused to harm innocents unnecessarily, grew frustrated when his uncle's strategies involved patience rather than action, and showed flashes of the person he might have been had his father not scarred him. The duality within Zuko, honor versus desperation, compassion versus obsession, created an internal war perhaps more intense than the one raging across the nations. He had been taught that capturing the Avatar would restore his honor, but what he couldn't yet understand was that true honor couldn't be granted by someone else, especially not by a father who had burned away half his face for showing mercy and refusing to fight. These converging paths, Aang's acceptance of his role as Avatar, Katara's emergence as a master waterbender in the heart of their group, Sokka's evolution from a boy-playing warrior to a true strategic mind, and Zuko's desperate hunt colored by his uncle's quiet redemption, were all heading toward the same destination. The Northern Water Tribe, the last stronghold of waterbending culture, where the moon and ocean spirits themselves resided in physical form. Where Katara would face the traditions that tried to limit her, where Sokka would fall in love with a princess bound by duty, where Aang would face the full might of the Fire Nation Navy, and where Zuko would make choices that revealed the man he was becoming beneath the scar. When Aang emerged from that iceberg, discovered by 2 teenagers from the Southern Water Tribe, he awoke to a world scarred by war. Katara, 14 years old with distinctive hair loops framing her face and eyes that held both hope and deep sadness, found him while searching for fish with her older brother. She was a waterbender, the last waterbender of the Southern Water Tribe, though she didn't know how to use her abilities properly. Years before, the Fire Nation had raided her village repeatedly, taking away every waterbender they could find to eliminate threats to their expansion. Katara's mother, Kia, had been killed during one of these raids, sacrificing herself by claiming to be the last waterbender to protect her daughter. This loss shaped Katara, forcing her to become the maternal heart of her family, caring for her warrior brother Sokka while their father Hakoda left with the other men of the tribe to fight in the war. Sokka, Katara's 15-year-old brother, carried his own burdens. With dark hair traditionally worn in a warrior's wolf tail and armed with his trusty boomerang, Sokka desperately wanted to be the warrior his father was, to protect his village and prove his worth. But without bending abilities of his own, and left behind when his father went to war, Sokka often felt inadequate, hiding his insecurities behind sarcasm and humor. He was logical where Katara was emotional, strategic where she was impulsive, and skeptical where she showed faith. Yet beneath his jokes and carefully maintained warrior facade, Sokka possessed a brilliant tactical mind and fierce loyalty that would prove invaluable. When Katara insisted they help the strange bald boy who emerged from the iceberg, Sokka was suspicious, cautious, protective of his sister. He couldn't have known this cheerful child was the avatar the world had been missing for a century. The three formed an unlikely family bound by destiny. Aang, still processing the devastating reality that everyone he'd ever known was gone, found in Katara someone who believed in him, who saw not just the Avatar but the 12-year-old boy who still wanted to penguin sled and make her laugh. Katara found in Aang hope for the first time since her mother's death, hope that someone could actually end the war, that the world could be balanced again. And Sokka, reluctant at first, discovered that this goofy kid on a 10-ton flying bison might actually be the key to everything they'd been fighting for. Together, mounted on Appa, a massive sky bison with 6 legs, a flat beaver-like tail, and horns that Aang used to guide him, they began a journey that would take them across the world. But they weren't the only ones searching. Prince Zuko, a 16-year-old firebender with a distinctive burn scar covering his left eye, had spent 3 years scouring the world for any sign of the Avatar. Banished from the Fire Nation by his own father, Fire Lord Ozai, Zuko believed that capturing the Avatar was the only way to restore his honor and return home. That scar told a story of its own, a permanent reminder of the day Zuko spoke out against the general's plan to sacrifice new recruits in battle. His father demanded he duel to defend his honor, but instead of facing the general, Zuko found himself in an Agni Kai, a formal firebending duel, against Fire Lord Ozai himself. When Zuko refused to fight his own father, Ozai burned his face and cast him out, declaring that only by capturing the Avatar could Zuko reclaim his birthright. Accompanied by his uncle Iroh, a retired Fire Nation general with a love for tea and a wisdom that ran deeper than anyone suspected, Zuko pursued Aang with desperate obsession, seeing in the Avatar not a person, but his only path home. And so these lives converged, a boy out of time, a girl holding her family together, a warrior without bending, and a scarred prince seeking redemption. Their journeys would interweave across nations, through friendships and battles, towards a destiny none of them could yet imagine. As our travelers began their journey across a war-torn world, they carried with them not just hope, but the weight of their own uncertainties and fears. Let us continue their story, discovering the depths of who they were and who they would become. Guiding Zuko through his exile was his uncle, Iroh, a man whose jovial demeanor and obsession with tea masked a profound and painful past. Known throughout the world as the Dragon of the West, Iroh was once a legendary Fire Nation general, the crown prince destined to become Fire Lord, and the only person in generations rumored to have breathed fire like the ancient dragons themselves. He had been a man of ambition and military brilliance, leading a 600-day siege against the Earth Kingdom's impenetrable capital city of Ba Sing Se. But during that siege, Iroh's only son, Lu Ten, was killed in battle. The grief shattered something fundamental in Iroh, causing him to abandon the siege and return home a changed man. His brother Ozai seized upon this moment of weakness to claim the throne, and Iroh, who had lost his taste for conquest and power, did not contest it. Now, in his exile with Zuko, Iroh sought not glory or honor, but rather to guide his nephew away from the path of anger and obsession, hoping to save Zuko from the darkness that consumed their family. His wisdom often came wrapped in proverbs, delivered between sips of jasmine tea, as he gently tried to show Zuko that honor couldn't be given by a father who had burned his son's face, it had to be found within. As Aang, Katara, and Sokka traveled, they encountered the true extent of the Fire Nation's devastation. The world that Aang remembered, vibrant, balanced, peaceful, existed only in his memories. They discovered villages living in fear, Earth Kingdom citizens oppressed under Fire Nation occupation, and the Southern Water Tribe reduced to a small collection of women, children, and elderly, all the warriors having left to fight. Yet within this darkness, Aang maintained something precious, his joy, his humor, his fundamental belief that life should be celebrated. This wasn't naivety, though Sokka sometimes mistook it as such. Aang's optimism was a choice, a conscious decision to remain himself despite the weight of being the Avatar. He would stop mid-journey to ride elephant koi or play with otter penguins, much to Sokka's exasperation. But these moments of lightness weren't distractions from his duty, they were what made Aang uniquely suited to be the Avatar. While past Avatars might have approached the mission with grim determination, Aang brought hope and laughter to people who had forgotten what those felt like. Katara's journey became one of discovering her own power and voice. For years, she had been the caretaker, the mother figure, always putting others' needs before her own. But as they traveled and she began learning waterbending, first from a stolen scroll, then from Master Pakku at the Northern Water Tribe, something awakened in her. Katara possessed an extraordinary gift for waterbending, her abilities growing at a rate that astounded even seasoned masters. She could sense water in places others couldn't, manipulate it with both power and precision, and eventually discovered she could heal injuries using water infused with spiritual energy, a rare ability even among waterbenders. Yet with this growing power came a fierce protectiveness and a temper that could be as dangerous as a tidal wave. When threatened or when someone she loved was in danger, Katara's usual compassion transformed into something formidable. She challenged an entire culture's sexist traditions at the Northern Water Tribe when they refused to teach her combat waterbending, ultimately proving herself worthy through her skill and determination. The world they traveled through was rich with spirits and ancient mysteries that Aang, as the Avatar, had to navigate. The Avatar's role wasn't just about mastering the four elements, It was about maintaining balance between the physical and spiritual worlds. Aang had a unique connection to the spirit world, able to meditate and project his consciousness into that ethereal realm where spirits dwelled. These weren't just abstract entities, spirits were real, powerful beings with their own motivations and conflicts. Some, like Hei Bai, the forest spirit that appeared as a massive panda-like creature, lashed out when humans damaged nature. Others, like Ko the Face Stealer, were ancient and dangerous, existing in the spirit world's darkest corners, waiting to steal the faces of those who showed any emotion in his presence. Aang had to learn to communicate with these beings, to understand their grievances, and to mediate between worlds that had grown increasingly disconnected during the Avatar's 100-year absence. His air nomad upbringing, with its emphasis on spirituality and balance, gave him advantages that more combative past avatars might not have possessed. The threads of destiny were pulling tighter, drawing them all toward moments that would change them forever, toward battles not just of elements, but of spirit and will. As winter approached and our travelers journeyed northward, the world continued to reveal its secrets, its scars, and the remarkable individuals who refused to let hope die. Let us continue deeper into their story. The Fire Nation's royal family was a study in darkness and dysfunction, a lineage poisoned by ambition and the pursuit of power. Fire Lord Ozai, who sat upon the throne with cold calculation rather than any warmth befitting his element, had two children who could not have been more different. Zuko, the eldest, we have come to know, scarred, banished, desperate. But his younger sister, Princess Azula, was everything their father wanted in an heir. At merely 14 years old, Azula was already a fire-bending prodigy who had mastered the rarest and most dangerous form of fire-bending, lightning generation. While normal flames burned red and orange, Azula's fire manifested in blue, burning hotter and more intense than any other firebender's flames. Her precision was surgical, her tactical mind rivaled seasoned generals, and her cruelty came not from rage but from cold, calculating malice. Yet beneath this perfect weapon of a daughter lay something deeply broken, a girl who had learned that love was weakness, that fear was the only reliable currency, and that her mother, Ursa, had thought her a monster. Azula's relationship with Zuko was venomous. She had been present when their father burned and banished him, and part of her relished his suffering, perhaps because in his failure, she could shine brighter in their father's eyes. The Avatar's connection to his past lives formed a chain of wisdom and power stretching back 10,000 years. When Aang meditated and reached across the spiritual bridge that connected all avatars, he could seek counsel from his previous incarnations, each offering unique perspectives shaped by their own eras. Avatar Roku, the avatar immediately before Aang and a firebender from the Fire Nation, carried particular relevance to the current conflict. Roku had been Fire Lord Sozin's closest friend in their youth, the two boys growing up together, sharing dreams and adventures. But when Sozin revealed his ambitions to spread the Fire Nation's prosperity by conquering other nations, Roku stood against him, warning his old friend that such actions violated the balance the Avatar existed to protect. Their friendship shattered that day, and though Roku prevented Sozin's early attempts at expansion, he failed to stop him completely. When Roku died, trapped on a volcanic island while Sozin stood by and watched, choosing to let his former friend perish rather than save him, Sozin seized the opportunity to launch his war. Roku carried immense guilt for this failure, for not being more decisive with his friend, and this regret echoed through to Aang, a warning about the dangers of hesitation and misplaced mercy. In their travels, the group encountered Toph Beifong, a 12-year-old girl who would revolutionize Aang's understanding of earthbending and become one of his most crucial teachers. Born blind to one of the wealthiest families in the Earth Kingdom, Toph had been sheltered and underestimated her entire life. Her parents saw her disability and treated her like fragile porcelain, a helpless child who needed constant protection. What they didn't know was that their daughter had learned earthbending from the original earthbenders themselves, the blind badger moles who navigated through Earth using seismic sense. Toph had developed the ability to see through earthbending, feeling vibrations through the soles of her bare feet that told her everything about her surroundings in far greater detail than eyes ever could. She could sense a person's heartbeat, detect lies through subtle shifts in breathing and stance, and feel someone approaching from hundreds of feet away. Under the alias The Blind Bandit, Toph had become the champion of Earth Rumble 6, an underground earthbending tournament, defeating opponents twice her size with a unique style that was both immovable as a rock and fluid as water. Small in stature but enormous in power and personality, Toph was blunt, sarcastic, and fiercely independent. She refused anyone's pity and despised being treated as helpless, often going out of her way to prove her strength. The city of Ba Sing Se, the massive capital of the Earth Kingdom, represented both hope and denial on a staggering scale. Protected by two enormous walls, the outer wall standing tall enough and thick enough to have withstood countless Fire Nation attacks, including Iroha's legendary siege, Ba Sing Se was considered impenetrable. Within its walls lived over 1 million people, divided into distinct rings based on social class, the lower ring for the poor, the middle ring for merchants and workers, and the upper ring for the wealthy elite in the Earth King's palace. But Ba Sing Se's greatest defense wasn't its walls, it was a disturbing system of cultural indoctrination and secrecy maintained by the Dai Li, the Earth Kingdom's elite secret police force. These earthbenders, dressed in distinctive stone gloves and conical hats, served not the Earth King but rather Grand Secretariat Long Feng, the true power behind the throne. Under Long Feng's orders, the Dai Li enforced a single absolute rule within Ba Sing Se: there was no war within the walls. Citizens were forbidden from discussing the war, refugees were silenced or disappeared, and any mention of the conflict that had ravaged the world for 100 years was treated as dangerous propaganda. The city lived in a state of enforced ignorance, its people dining in tea shops and attending cultural events while Earth Kingdom villages burned beyond their walls. This willful blindness, this choice to maintain comfort and order through lies, would prove to be as dangerous as any Fire Nation attack. Aang's connection to the Avatar state was both his greatest power and his most terrifying vulnerability. When triggered by mortal danger or overwhelming emotion, the Avatar state allowed Aang to channel the combined knowledge, skills, and power of all his past lives, his eyes and tattoos glowing with ethereal light as he became nearly unstoppable. In this state, he could create hurricanes, part oceans, and defeat enemies that would otherwise overwhelm him. But there was a terrible catch that Aang learned from Avatar Roku: if he were killed while in the Avatar state, the reincarnation cycle would end forever. All those past lives, that continuous chain of avatars stretching back 10 millennia to Avatar 1, the very first Avatar who bound with the Spirit of Light during the era of harmonic convergence, would be severed. The world would lose its bridge to the spirit world, its protector, its source of balance. This knowledge created a terrible dilemma for Aang. The avatar state was his most powerful tool, yet using it risked everything the world needed to survive. Learning to control the avatar state, to trigger it at will rather than through emotional distress, became one of Aang's most crucial challenges, requiring him to master not just the elements, but his own spirit. The complexity of the war revealed itself in individuals who defied simple categorization as good or evil. Jet, a charismatic teenage freedom fighter with twin-hook swords and wheat habitually held between his teeth, led a group of orphan children called the Freedom Fighters against Fire Nation forces occupying the Earth Kingdom. These children, all scarred by the war, some having watched their parents die, their villages burn, had adopted guerrilla tactics to strike back at their oppressors. Jet's charm and revolutionary rhetoric initially drew Katara's admiration. Here was someone actively fighting the Fire Nation, someone who understood loss as she did. But Jet's methods revealed a darkness born from trauma. He was willing to destroy an entire Earth Kingdom village, drowning innocent civilians along with Fire Nation soldiers, to strike a blow against the enemy. When Sokka discovered this plan and the group stopped him, it revealed a painful truth: the war had created monsters on both sides, people so consumed by hatred and pain that they had lost sight of the very things they claimed to be fighting for. Jet represented what any of them could become if they let rage guide their choices, a cautionary tale of how victimhood could transform into villainy. Among the spirits Aang encountered in his role as bridge between worlds, few were as significant as the moon and ocean spirits, Tue and La. These ancient entities had taken physical form as koi fish, one white, one black, swimming in an eternal circle in a sacred pool at the Northern Water Tribe's spiritual center. They were the push and pull, the yin and yang, representing balance in its purest form. Waterbending itself drew power from the moon, which was why waterbenders were stronger at night and during the full moon, and powerless during a solar eclipse when the moon blocked the sun. The ocean's spirit complemented the moon, the two forever dancing together, giving and taking, rising and falling like the tides they influenced. These spirits had existed since the beginning, and the Northern Water Tribe had built their entire civilization around protecting them, understanding that if anything happened to these physical forms, the consequences would be catastrophic not just for waterbenders, but for the world's balance itself. The vulnerability of such powerful spirits existing in mortal form was a risk, but also a gift, a demonstration of trust between the spiritual and physical worlds that the Avatar was sworn to protect. As these paths converged and these truths revealed themselves, the nature of the conflict became clearer. This wasn't simply a war between nations, but a battle for the soul of the world itself. It was about whether power justified domination, whether the ends justified the means, whether individuals could rise above the cycles of hatred and revenge that had defined their lives. Zuko continued his hunt while Iroh continued his patient work of redemption. Azula moved her pieces on the board with cold precision. Aang struggled to balance being a child with being the world's last hope. And in Ba Sing Se, beneath layers of lies and social order, something dark was brewing, a conspiracy that would threaten everything. The elements were aligning, not just air and water and earth and fire, but the human elements of choice, consequence, and the eternal question of who we choose to become when the world demands everything from us. As our story unfolds and the layers of this world reveal themselves, we discover that every character carries within them both light and shadow, hope and despair. Let us continue this journey, understanding the forces that shaped them and the choices that would define them. The Fire Nation's transformation from a nation of honor to one of conquest began with a celestial event that changed the course of history. Sozon's comet, named after the Fire Lord who first used it, was a comet that passed near the planet once every 100 years, dramatically enhancing the power of all firebenders during its passage. When Fire Lord Sozon witnessed this comet during his reign, he saw not a natural wonder but a weapon, an opportunity to strike at the other nations when his firebenders would be at their most powerful. It was during this comet's arrival that Sozon launched the devastating attack on the air nomads, using the amplified power to commit genocide against an entire people. The comet transformed ordinary firebenders into forces of nature, allowing them to create flames of such magnitude that they could incinerate everything in their path. Now, as the comet approached once more at the end of summer, timed with cruel precision to arrive 100 years after Aang's disappearance, Fire Lord Ozai planned to use it to complete his father's and grandfather's work, to burn the Earth Kingdom to ash and cement Fire Nation dominance over the entire world. The comet's return became a countdown, a deadline by which Aang had to master all 4 elements and somehow stop the most powerful firebender in the world, or watch the world burn. Katara's journey led her to discover one of waterbending's darkest and most forbidden techniques, bloodbending. This horrifying ability was first revealed to her by Hama, an elderly woman from the Southern Water Tribe who had been captured by the Fire Nation decades ago and imprisoned under terrible conditions. During the full moon, when waterbenders' power peaked, Hama had discovered she could bend the water within living bodies, the blood flowing through veins, the moisture in every cell. With this power, she could control people like puppets, forcing their limbs to move against their will, paralyzing them, or causing excruciating pain. Hama had used bloodbending to escape her prison and had been living in the Earth Kingdom, using this technique to exact revenge on Fire Nation citizens every full moon. When she taught this skill to Katara, recognizing in her a fellow Southern Tribe waterbender, Katara was horrified by what she could do. The ability to take away someone's free will, to control their body as if they were a mere object, violated everything Katara believed about respecting life and autonomy. Though she vowed never to use it again, the knowledge remained within her, a dark option she could call upon if she ever faced a situation desperate enough to warrant it. This moment represented a loss of innocence for Katara, a recognition that power itself was neutral, but the choice of how to use it defined whether someone was a hero or a monster. The relationship between Aang and Katara deepened beyond friendship into something more complex and tender. Aang, despite being technically 112 years old, was emotionally and physically 12, experiencing his first crush with all the awkwardness and intensity that comes with young love. Katara represented everything beautiful in the world he'd lost: compassion, strength, hope, and a connection to the present when everything he'd known existed only in memory. For Katara, Aang was both the boy who made her laugh and the avatar who could end the war that had stolen so much from her. Their relationship existed in a delicate space between friendship and romance, with Aang's feelings clear and Katara's more complicated, unsure if she saw him as the goofy kid who made her smile or as something more. Moments between them, a dance at a Fire Nation festival where they moved together in perfect harmony, a kiss before a dangerous mission, hinted at possibilities, but Katara's protective instincts and Aang's responsibilities as the Avatar made any simple resolution impossible. Their connection was genuine and deep, but it existed under the shadow of war, duty, and the question of whether there would even be a future where such feelings could fully bloom. Iroha's past contained a secret that elevated him beyond a simple failed general or tea-loving uncle. During his military campaigns before Lu Ten's death, Iroha had encountered the last two dragons, Ran and Sha, creatures thought extinct after Fire Nation hunters had killed them all to prove their fire-bending prowess. The dragons, ancient and wise, had shown Iroha the true source of fire-bending, not anger or rage, as the Fire Nation had come to teach, but the sun itself, life and energy in their purest forms. This revelation had fundamentally changed Iroha's understanding of his own element. To protect the dragons from those who would hunt them, Iroha claimed to have slain the last dragon himself, earning the title Dragon of the West, when in truth he had become their guardian. This secret knowledge made Iroha one of the few people alive who understood firebending's original purpose, not destruction, but life, warmth, and light. His wisdom wasn't just philosophical musing, it was born from a genuine enlightenment that transcended his nation's corrupted teachings. When he would eventually teach Zuko that fire wasn't just about consuming and destroying, but about energy and life, he would be sharing the dragon's ancient wisdom. The Kyoshi Warriors, an all-female group of non-bending warriors from Kyoshi Island, embodied the legacy of one of the Avatar's most formidable past lives. Avatar Kyoshi, who had lived to be 230 years old, the longest-lived Avatar in recorded history, was an earthbender known for her unwavering conviction and willingness to make difficult choices. When a conqueror threatened her home, Kyoshi had literally separated a peninsula from the mainland, using earthbending on a scale that created an entire island, which was then named in her honor. The Kyoshi warriors, led by the skilled and proud Suki, trained in Kyoshi's image, wearing elaborate makeup and armor designed to honor the Avatar's memory. They fought using fans as weapons, combining grace with deadly precision, proving that one didn't need bending to be a formidable warrior. Suki herself became a crucial ally and eventually Sokka's love interest, seeing past his initial chauvinism to the capable warrior and strategist beneath. Their relationship began with Suki teaching Sokka humility by thoroughly defeating him in combat, then training him in the Kyoshi warrior style after he showed genuine respect and willingness to learn. The warriors represented an important truth in this world: bending was powerful, but dedication, skill, and the warrior spirit could make anyone formidable. The spirit world held within it the story of the very first Avatar, a tale that explained how the Avatar came to exist at all. 10,000 years before Aang's time, during an era called the Age of Rava, humans lived on the backs of giant lion turtles, ancient creatures the size of cities that protected humanity from the wild and dangerous spirits that roamed the earth. People could temporarily receive bending abilities from these lion turtles when they ventured into the spirit wilds to gather food, then return the power upon coming home. Wan, a young man from the fire lion turtle, stole the power of firebending permanently and was banished for his crime. Over years of living among spirits, Wan befriended Rava, the spirit of light and peace, who was locked in eternal conflict with Vatu, the spirit of darkness and chaos. When Wan accidentally caused Rava and Vatu to separate during harmonic convergence, a rare cosmic event when the spirit and physical worlds drew closest, he spent years mastering all four elements from their original sources, the dragons, the badger moles, the sky bison, and the moon. Eventually, one fused permanently with Rava to defeat Vatu, becoming the first avatar, the bridge between worlds. This fusion created the avatar cycle, with Rava's spirit carrying forward through reincarnation, accumulating the knowledge and power of each life. Understanding this origin story revealed why the avatar existed, not as a weapon or tool, but as a bridge, a keeper of balance between light and dark, physical and spiritual. Prince Zuko's journey toward redemption contained a pivotal moment in the crystal catacombs beneath Ba Sing Se, where he faced a choice that would define his character. Trapped underground with Katara, his enemy, they shared a moment of genuine connection. Katara told him about her mother's death at the hands of the Fire Nation, and Zuko revealed the story of his scar, of his father's cruelty. For a brief, beautiful moment, they weren't enemies but two scarred teenagers who understood loss. Katara even offered to use her healing water, sacred water from the North Pole's spirit oasis, to heal Zuko's scar, a gesture of profound forgiveness and compassion. But when Azula and the Daily attacked, offering Zuko a choice between helping Aang and Katara or joining his sister to capture the Avatar and reclaim his honor, Zuko chose wrong. Despite everything Iroh had taught him, despite that moment of connection with Katara, Zuko sided with Azula, betraying the trust that had begun to form. He helped Azula strike Aang down with lightning while the Avatar was in the Avatar state, nearly killing him and almost ending the Avatar cycle forever. Only Katara's use of that sacred spirit water saved Aang's life, but the cost was immense. Zuko's betrayal, his choice of conditional honor over genuine redemption, wounded something deep in those who had begun to see him as more than an enemy. Yet this betrayal, this wrong choice, was not the end of Zuko's story but rather a necessary part of his journey. Zuko returned to the Fire Nation, welcomed home by his father, given everything he thought he wanted. But the victory felt hollow, the honor empty, and the nightmares came every night. He had achieved his goal but lost something far more valuable, his integrity, his uncle's trust, and the person he was becoming before fear drove him back to seeking his father's approval. Sometimes, we must make the wrong choice to understand why it was wrong, must walk the path of darkness to appreciate the light. Zuko's redemption wouldn't come from a single heroic act but from the slow, painful process of recognizing that the honor he sought couldn't be given by a father who had never truly loved him, that the scar on his face was not a mark of shame but a testament to his compassion, and that true honor came from making the right choice even when it cost him everything. And so the pieces moved across the board, each choice rippling outward, each moment of darkness containing the seeds of light, each betrayal holding within it the possibility of redemption. The comet was coming, the final confrontation approaching, and everyone, hero and villain alike, would have to decide who they truly were. As the summer waned and the comet drew closer, the weight of destiny pressed upon everyone. Choices made in darkness would seek the light, and those who had walked separate paths would find themselves converging toward an inevitable confrontation. Let us continue, discovering the final pieces of this intricate tapestry. Zuko's redemption began not with a grand gesture, but with a quiet realization during a beach vacation with his sister and her companions. On Ember Island, the Fire Nation royal family's private retreat, Zuko and Azula spent time with Mai and Ty Lee, Mai, Zuko's girlfriend with her monotone voice and expertise with throwing knives, and Ty Lee, the cheerful acrobat who could block chi and disable benders with precise strikes to pressure points. During a night around a campfire, each revealed their pain. Ty Lee confessed to feeling invisible, one of 7 identical sisters, joining the circus and later Azula to stand out. Mai revealed her emotionally stifling upbringing where she was taught to suppress all feelings. And Zuko, finally, spoke his truth. He was angry at himself for his choices, angry that he couldn't figure out what was right, angry that achieving everything he thought he wanted felt like nothing. This moment of vulnerability, of admitting he was lost even after getting everything he'd fought for, marked the beginning of his transformation. Sometimes the path to redemption starts not with knowing what's right, but with admitting that what we thought was right has left us empty. The war's impact on ordinary people revealed itself in places like the town of Chin, where Aang faced trial for a crime Avatar Kyoshi had committed centuries before. The village believed Kyoshi had murdered their beloved leader, Chin the Conqueror, and they held Aang responsible through the Avatar connection. When Aang channeled Kyoshi's spirit to defend himself, the towering female Avatar's presence filled him, her voice speaking through him with absolute conviction. Kyoshi admitted she had indeed created the separation that caused Chin's death, not through murder, but by splitting the peninsula when Chin refused to stop his conquering advance. She held no regret, stating plainly, "I killed him, and I would do it again." Her absolute certainty, her willingness to make hard choices and stand by them without guilt or hesitation, contrasted sharply with Aang's more gentle nature. This revealed something crucial about being the Avatar. Each incarnation brought their own personality, their own moral compass, and their own way of maintaining balance. Where Kyoshi saw a clear threat and acted decisively, Aang struggled with the weight of taking life, even to save others. The trial forced Aang to confront that his past lives might not always agree with his own values, and that being the Avatar meant carrying their actions while still being true to himself. Toph's relationship with her parents illuminated the complex pain of being misunderstood by those who love you. Lao and Poppy Beifong loved their daughter deeply, but they couldn't see past her blindness to recognize her strength. They had hired Master Yu to teach her basic earthbending, never knowing she snuck out to fight in tournaments. When they finally discovered the truth about her abilities, her father's response wasn't pride but fear that led him to hire bounty hunters to bring her home, to lock her away even more securely. Toph's running away was a rebellion for its own sake. It was a desperate need to be seen for who she truly was, not as a helpless blind girl but as the greatest earthbender in the world. Her struggle resonated with anyone who has ever felt trapped by others' limited perceptions, anyone who has had to choose between the comfort of being cared for and the freedom of being themselves. Eventually, through letters and time, Toph and her father would find a tentative understanding, but the scars of not being believed, not being trusted to know your own capabilities, would remain tender spots in her armored heart. The Sun Warriors, the last remnants of the original Fire Nation culture before it became corrupted by conquest, held the key to Zuko's complete transformation. After Zuko joined Aang's group, the decision that came after his soul-searching, after leaving Mai in the Fire Nation, after confronting his father on the day of Black Sun, he discovered his firebending had weakened. He had lost his drive, his anger, the fuel that had powered his flames for years. Searching for answers, Zuko and Aang traveled to the Sun Warriors' ancient civilization, hidden away from the modern world. There, they met the last 2 dragons, Ran and Sha, the same dragons Iroh had protected years before. The dragons performed the dancing dragon form, ancient movements that displayed fire not as a weapon of destruction but as the essence of life itself, flames in every color swirling around the dragons in a breathtaking display of beauty and power. In that moment, both Aang and Zuko understood, firebending wasn't fueled by rage or hate, but by life, by breath, by the energy of the sun itself. For Zuko, this revelation was transformative. His firebending returned, stronger than ever, because it now came from a desire to protect rather than destroy, from love rather than anger. He had to lose everything, his nation, his anger, his old identity, to discover who he truly was and what his fire truly meant. Sokka's journey led him to the most important teacher he would ever have, Pandao, a master swordsman who had once served the Fire Nation military before becoming disillusioned and leaving to pursue art, strategy, and the true warrior's path. Pandao lived in the Fire Nation, yet he trained students of all nations, believing that knowledge and skill should transcend political boundaries. When Sokka came to him, desperate to prove himself as a warrior beyond just being the guy without powers, Pandao took him seriously. He taught Sokka that being a warrior wasn't just about fighting, it was about creativity, intelligence, art, and understanding that the same hand that wields a sword should also be able to paint a landscape. Under Pandao's tutelage, Sokka forged his own sword from a meteorite that had fallen from the sky, space Earth, material from beyond their world. This blade, made from a shooting star, became Sokka's signature weapon, an extension of his growth from the insecure boy who couldn't bend to the strategic warrior whose mind was as sharp as his blade. Pandao's final lesson was perhaps the most important. He had known from the beginning that Sokka was from the Water Tribe, that they were technically enemies, but he trained him anyway because he saw beyond national boundaries to the worthy student before him. This taught Sokka that honor and wisdom existed in all nations, even the Fire Nation, and that the war had obscured this truth for far too long. The Day of Black Sun represented the invasion force's best chance to defeat the Fire Lord, a solar eclipse during which all firebending would cease for 8 minutes. The event had been predicted years in advance, and the combined forces of the Water Tribes, Earth Kingdom warriors, and various resistance fighters planned a massive invasion of the Fire Nation capital during this window of vulnerability. Sokka, with his strategic mind, had helped plan the invasion, accounting for every variable, every possible contingency. The force included his father Hakoda, whom Sokka hadn't seen in years, creating an emotional reunion weighted with Sokka's need to prove himself to the man who had left him behind. But the invasion failed because Azula had learned of the plan through her conquest of Ba Sing Se and the breaking of Long Foam. The Fire Lord and his court had hidden in underground bunkers, and by the time the invasion force reached them, the eclipse was ending. The adults sacrificed themselves, staying behind to be captured so the children, Aang, Sokka, Katara, Toph, and others, could escape on Appa. The failure was devastating, not just strategically but emotionally, as these young people were once again left to carry burdens too heavy for their shoulders, forced to flee while their parents and mentors faced imprisonment and interrogation. Among the most profound relationships in the story was the bond between Zuko and Iroh, a love that transcended blood and politics to become something pure and redemptive. After Zuko's betrayal in Ba Sing Se, Iroh was imprisoned by the Fire Nation, and Zuko was left with the hollow victory he'd sought. When Zuko finally found the courage to visit his uncle in prison to seek forgiveness, Iroh, who had every right to be angry, to reject his nephew, instead turned away silently, not out of hatred, but because he knew Zuko needed to complete his journey on his own. Iroha's love for Zuko was patient, unconditional, and wise enough to know that forgiveness given too easily wouldn't help Zuko grow. After Zuko joined Aang and proved through actions that he had changed, after he faced Azula and risked everything for the right cause, Iroh finally embraced him. Their reunion was one of the most emotionally powerful moments in the entire story, Iroh holding Zuko while saying, "I was never angry with you. I was sad because I was afraid you'd lost your way." This revealed Iroha's incredible capacity for love and forgiveness, and his understanding that sometimes people need to make mistakes, even terrible ones, to find their true path. Iroh had been the father Ozai never was, patient where Ozai was cruel, understanding where Ozai was demanding, and loving without conditions where Ozai's love came with impossible prices. As the comet's arrival drew near, Aang faced the most difficult question of his life. How could he defeat Fire Lord Ozai without killing him? Every past avatar he consulted, Roku, Kyoshi, Kuruk, and Yangchen, told him the same thing. He had to be willing to take Ozai's life to protect the world. Even Avatar Yangchen, a fellow Airbender who shared his peaceful culture's values, told him that the Avatar could not prioritize their own spiritual needs over the world's survival. But Aang, raised in the air nomad tradition that all life was sacred, couldn't accept this answer. He had never taken a life, not even in the heat of battle, always finding ways to incapacitate or redirect rather than kill. The thought of intentionally ending someone's existence, even someone as monstrous as Ozai, violated everything he believed. This wasn't naivety or weakness, it was a profound commitment to his values, a refusal to let the war change who he was at his core. Aang's struggle represented the eternal question of whether the ends justify the means, whether you can truly defeat evil by becoming like it, whether maintaining your principles matters when the entire world hangs in the balance. And so we arrive at the precipice, at the moment when all paths converge, when the comet blazes across the sky, when a 12-year-old boy must face the most powerful firebender in history, when a scarred prince must face his sister in a duel that will determine the Fire Nation's future, when every choice, every lesson, every moment of growth leads to this final test. As Sozin's comet blazed across the sky, turning it the color of fire and blood, the world held its breath. Every journey, every relationship, every hard-won lesson would be tested in these final moments. Let us witness how the story reaches its crescendo, how destinies are fulfilled, and how the question of who we choose to be is answered not through words, but through action. In the moments before the final battle, Aang disappeared, vanishing from Ember Island where the group had been hiding and planning. His friends searched frantically, not understanding that Aang had been called to a mysterious island that appeared in the middle of the ocean. This island was alive. It was a lion turtle, one of the ancient beings from the time before the Avatar, creatures so massive that entire forests grew upon their shells, so old that they remembered when the world was young. The lion turtle spoke to Aang in a voice that resonated with timeless wisdom, telling him of an era before bending, when the lion turtles bent not the elements but the energy within themselves. The creature placed a massive paw on Aang's forehead and chest, and in that moment, Aang received a gift that would change everything, the knowledge of energy bending, the ability to bend the life force within a person. This ancient art was dangerous. If the bender's spirit was not incorruptible, they would be corrupted and destroyed by the energy they tried to bend. But if successful, energy bending could do what no element could. It could take away someone's bending permanently, removing their power without taking their life. This gift was the answer to Aang's impossible dilemma, a way to stop Ozai while remaining true to his values. The lion turtle's final words echoed with profound meaning. The true mind can weather all the lies and illusions without being lost. The true heart can tough the poison of hatred without being harmed. Fire Lord Ozai, as the comet empowered him beyond imagining, revealed the depths of his megalomania and cruelty. He had promoted Azula to Fire Lord, not as an honor but as a dismissal, taking for himself the title of Phoenix King, ruler not just of the Fire Nation but of the world he intended to create from ashes. His plan was clear and horrifying. Using the comet's power, he would lead his airship fleet to burn the entire Earth Kingdom, scorching it completely, eliminating any possibility of resistance and rebuilding it as a Fire Nation colony. This wasn't conquest, it was genocide on a scale that would make even Sozin's attack on the air nomads seem small. Ozai had no doubts, no hesitation, no flicker of humanity in his golden eyes. He was power made manifest, believing absolutely in his right to reshape the world in fire. When Aang finally confronted him on his flagship airship, Ozai was contemptuous, mocking this child who dared challenge a god. The battle that followed was spectacular and terrifying. Ozai's flames, enhanced by the comet, were like natural disasters, creating explosions that could be seen for miles. He pursued Aang relentlessly across a landscape of stone pillars, destroying everything in his path, his blue flames from the comet mixing with red-orange fire to create an inferno that seemed unstoppable. The Agni Kai between Zuko and Azula was not just a battle for the throne but a tragic confrontation between two broken children destroyed by their father's cruelty in different ways. Azula, who should have been at her moment of triumph, was instead unraveling. Her mother's departure, which she had always pretended not to care about, had left wounds that festered. Her friends Mai and Ty Lee had betrayed her, Mai choosing love for Zuko over fear of Azula, and Ty Lee choosing loyalty to Mai over loyalty to Azula, showing that fear couldn't sustain relationships forever. Alone and paranoid, Azula had begun to lose her grip, cutting her hair unevenly, seeing her mother's face in mirrors, banishing servants she imagined were plotting against her. During the Agni Kai, fought in the Fire Nation Palace courtyard as the comet blazed overhead, Azula's famous precision had deteriorated into wild, desperate attacks. Her blue flames were no less powerful but less controlled, fueled by rage and fear rather than the cold calculation she was known for. Zuko, fighting with the true understanding of firebending he'd learned from the dragons, was actually winning, not through superior power, but through balance, through having found his center while Azula had lost hers. It was heartbreaking to watch this 14-year-old girl, who had been molded into a perfect weapon, shatter under the weight of expectations and abandonment. The moment that crystallized Zuko's complete transformation came when Azula, realizing she was losing the Agni Kai, broke the sacred rules of the duel by targeting Katara instead. Lightning crackled from Azula's fingertips, aimed not at her brother but at the waterbender watching from the sidelines. Zuko had learned to redirect lightning from Iroh, a technique that could save him from the deadliest firebending attack by channeling the electricity through his body and releasing it harmlessly. But in that split second, Zuko didn't think about himself, didn't calculate the risk. He simply threw himself in front of Katara, taking the lightning strike meant for her. The electricity didn't pass cleanly through him as it should have. It went near his heart, and the pain was unimaginable. But Zuko had made his choice, the choice that defined everything he'd learned, everything he'd become. He chose to protect someone else at the cost of his own life, the opposite of everything his father had taught him, the opposite of the selfish prince who had once cared only about his own honor. As he lay on the ground, barely conscious, it was Katara who finished the battle, using the comet-enhanced battlefield to her advantage, chaining Azula and defeating her in combat. And in the end, Azula, the prodigy, the perfect daughter, the ultimate weapon, lay sobbing and screaming, consumed by blue flames of her own making, broken not by her brother but by the lifetime of cruelty and impossible standards that had shaped her. During Aang's battle with Ozai, there came a moment of terrible danger when a pointed rock struck Aang's back precisely where Azula's lightning had scarred him in Ba Sing Se. The impact triggered something profound. It released a chakra that had been blocked since that near-death experience, and suddenly, involuntarily, Aang entered the Avatar state. His eyes and tattoos blazed with ethereal light as he became a conduit for the power of all his past lives. The battle's tide turned instantly. Aang, in this state, was unstoppable, bending earth and air and water and fire simultaneously, creating a sphere of elements around himself that attacked and defended in perfect harmony. He bent the very landscape, raising stone pillars and commanding water from underground sources, creating hurricanes with his breath. Ozai, for all his comet-enhanced power, found himself overwhelmed, outmatched by forces beyond any single bender. Aang trapped him against a rock wall, the elements converging, ready to deliver the killing blow that every past avatar urged him to make. The world held its breath, waiting for the Fire Lord's end. But in that moment of absolute power, Aang made the choice that defined not just the battle but the very meaning of being the Avatar in this new era. He released the Avatar state through sheer force of will, something no Avatar had done before, choosing to end the state not because the threat was eliminated but because he refused to kill, even with every voice from his past lives telling him it was necessary. Instead, Aang placed his hands on Ozai's forehead and chest, in the same position the lion turtle had touched him, and he bent Ozai's energy. The screen went white, then dark, as two spirits collided, Aang's incorruptible light against Ozai's consuming darkness. For a moment, it seemed Aang might be overwhelmed, corrupted by Ozai's poisonous energy. But the lion turtle's wisdom held true. Aang's spirit was unbending, his commitment to his values absolute. Light overcame darkness, and when the energy faded, Ozai remained alive but forever changed. His bending was gone, taken away completely, leaving him powerless, not dead, but neutralized, forced to live with the consequences of his choices without the power he'd used to enforce his will. Aang had found a third option that none of his past lives had considered, proving that mercy and justice weren't mutually exclusive, that you could stop someone without becoming like them. The end of the war came not with more violence but with restoration and healing. Zuko, recovered from his lightning wound thanks to Katara's healing, stood before his people and was crowned Fire Lord. His first act was to declare war over, to commit the Fire Nation to reparations and peace, and to begin the long process of healing the damage his family had inflicted. In his coronation speech, Zuko spoke words that would have been unthinkable from a Fire Nation ruler. I want to ask you to help me restore the honor of the Fire Nation and restore the balance to the world. I know that many of you are afraid of me and distrust me, but I am here to serve you, not to be feared." It was a complete rejection of everything Ozai had stood for, a new vision of leadership based on service rather than domination. And standing beside him, as his most trusted advisor, was Iroh, no longer just his uncle but his guide in rebuilding a nation's soul. In the final days after the war, the group found peace in Ba Sing Se, the city that had once been a place of lies and conspiracy now freed under King K's restored rule. They gathered at Iroh's new tea shop, the Jasmine Dragon, where the old general had finally fulfilled his simple dream of serving tea in a city at peace. Watching Zuko and Mai reunite, Sokka and Suki laugh together, Toph creating wanted posters of herself as the world's greatest earthbender, and Aang and Katara finally sharing a kiss on the balcony as the sun set. This was the future they had fought for. Not a world without pain or complexity, but one where people were free to choose their own paths, where nations could coexist, where a 12-year-old boy didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone anymore. Aang had fulfilled his duty as the Avatar, but more importantly, he had remained himself, playful, compassionate, committed to life and joy even in the darkest moments. He had shown that the Avatar's greatest power wasn't the ability to bend all four elements, but the wisdom to know when to fight and when to show mercy, when to be hard as stone and when to be flexible as water. The legacy of Team Avatar extended beyond the war's end, each member carrying forward the lessons they'd learned. Toph would eventually found the metal-bending police force in Republic City, discovering and teaching a form of bending previously thought impossible, taking her revolutionary understanding of earthbending and sharing it with others. Sokka would become a councilman and leader, his strategic mind helping shape the New World Order. Katara would become the world's greatest waterbending master and healer, teaching new generations while helping Aang rebuild the air nomad culture. Zuko, as Fire Lord, would spend years working toward redemption for his nation, hunting down his father's most dangerous followers while struggling with the legacy of cruelty his family had created. And Aang, the last Airbender, would work tirelessly to restore balance, eventually helping create Republic City, a place where all nations could live together as equals, where benders and non-benders could coexist in harmony. Their friendships, forged in the crucible of war, would last their entire lives, a found family held together not by blood but by shared struggle, mutual respect, and love that transcended nations, elements, and the boundaries people created to divide themselves. And so the circle closes, the balance restored, not perfectly, but genuinely. The world saved not by power alone, but by compassion, wisdom, friendship, and the unwavering belief that who we choose to be matters more than what we're destined to become. May these truths bring you peace as you drift towards sleep, carrying with you the knowledge that even in darkness, even when the weight seems unbearable, hope endures, friendships sustain, and choosing mercy over vengeance, love over fear, can indeed change the world.